Good morning and welcome to those of you who have just joined us in the past few minutes. I'd like to invite anyone who would wish to do so to download the event slides and the resources that we have in support of today's webinar before we get started here in about 7 minutes or so at the top of the hour. If you would need help locating those, they are available on our event page, which is listed here on our welcome slide. We'll also post that link to the chat pod here in just a second for your convenience because it'll be hyperlinked there. Additionally, if you need tech support at any time today, please shoot us an email support request at our MFLN email address, milfamln@gmail.com. And additionally, if you wish to say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, as well as any aspects that you are particularly interested in digging into a bit deeper today. You can type that in the chat pod, and we would certainly love to hear from you throughout today's session as well with any questions that you may have for our presenters. Should you need anything else, just let us know by typing in the chat pod or shooting us an email. We'll get started here at the top of the hour. Thanks again for joining us. Good morning and welcome. If you're just joining us, thanks so much for tuning in. Just wanted to hop in real quick before we get started to let you know that the slides and a list of additional resources is available for download on our event page. You can find that at the Military Families Learning Network.org link that is posted here on the slide. Additionally, should you need tech support before or during today's webinar, please note down our MFLN email address, which is the best way to reach us for these sorts of inquiries. Additionally, as some of you have already done, please let us know where you're logging in from, say hello, and kind of get warmed up for our conversation today. So we're going to be doing some discussion as well as learning some really wonderful resources and initiatives from our two presenters today, which we are so excited to introduce here in just a couple of minutes. So thanks again for joining us. We'll get started here in just about a minute, and we're glad that you're here. Good morning. It's now the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off for today. My name is Coral Owen. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for the Military Families Learning Network, and it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you to today's session. Today's webinar on building a battle plan for military and veteran families is hosted by the MFLN Community Capacity Building Concentration Area. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around and hopefully have a great experience today. Hopefully you can currently view the slides that we're sharing. If you're unable to see them or having any other difficulties, please shoot us an email at milfamln@gmail.com for tech support. And also, as some of you have already done, we look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversation and for questions. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversation, simply place your cursor over the slides that we're sharing. From there, you should see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. And then from there, you can click the chat bubble icon. Also, when typing questions and comments, please be sure to select that all panelists and attendees response option from the drop-down menu so that everyone is able to view them in the chat pod. We'll also be covering evaluation and certificate information at the end of today's session. The Military Families Learning Network is part of a DoD-USDA partnership for military families, and our passion is to connect military family service providers and cooperative extension professionals to research and to each other through innovative online programming. It's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers for today's webinar, Mrs. Barbara Thompson and Ms. Keisha Bailey. Mrs. Thompson served as the Director of the Office of Military Community and Family Policy at the Office of the Deputy Assistant Military Community and Family Policy from 2006 until her retirement in 2017. In this role, she was responsible for programs and policies that promoted military families' well-being, readiness, and quality of life. Ms. Bailey is a graduate research assistant at the Military Family Research Institute and a student in the Human Development and Family Studies doctoral program. Her current research focuses on how family contexts like parental military service may influence youth development through mechanisms like instrumental and emotional caregiving behaviors. I'll now turn things over to Barbara and to Keisha to get us started. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We're so glad that you were able to join us today. And Keisha and I were co-authors for a chapter in the battle plan, and we want to share things that we've learned over the years, and hope that this can be a very interactive presentation. So please ask questions, and please give us your feedback. We're very interested in that. Okay. So I have the slide control. Okay. There we go. Oops. Sorry. So, first of all, we want to start by getting your feedback. And I think it'd be really important for us to know if you have ever found yourself in a situation where you thought you could use a battle plan. So, can you please respond to this poll? Oh my goodness, 100% said yes. That's amazing. So, just like Kevin in Home Alone, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies, it seems like all of us have had the experience of being in a situation where we wish we would have had some kind of a reference that would help us respond to military families or civilian families in a holistic manner. Okay. Um, There. So this is the book that includes the chapter that Keisha and I wrote. It's was produced with a lot of different authors in mind because we recognize that not one person had all the answers, and so we've had actually um, people from advocacy, from government, from higher education, from researchers, employers, people from the Guard and Reserve, mental health, philanthropy, all were involved in developing this book. And so I'm going to turn it over to Keisha right now.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that lovely introduction. As Barbara said, this is the battle plan for supporting military families, and this is kind of a reference that we'll use today. The battle plan book came about in 2015 when the Military Family Research Institute convened a diverse group, as Barbara said, of experienced leaders from fields of corporate, philanthropy, behavioral health, higher education, and research to discuss and distill lessons about serving military families after 9/11. The purpose of this book, and you see those principles on your screen right now, was to be a roadmap for the future aimed at helping those connected to military families and military family communities adopt policies to help rather than hinder military families during times of conflict and peace, as well as to ensure that military families have a voice in the conversation. All right. So on your screen right now is just a little introduction. Oh,
Sorry, this this is not working for me. My computer must be really slow, I think. So it's not going back. Mm,
Barbara, I'm happy to
yeah.
forward the slides if y'all just give me a verbal cue.
Okay, that might be
Okay,
great. Can you go back
Ab-
to slide 8?
absolutely.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay. So I was actually in the Pentagon on 9/11, and the following day, we set up the Pentagon Family Assistance Center in the Sheraton Hotel to support the families of the victims of this tragedy. And I will say that I wish I would have had a reference to better prepare me for what we were experiencing. And, what, 15 years later, um, the MFRI really helped to bring about this group of people to really look at this issue and how we can better affect the support that we provide um, our, our military families, are really civilian families when tragedy strikes. Keisha?
Um, and my experience kind of started um, as one of my goals in graduate school was to really learn how to make a thoughtful and meaningful contribution to the bridge between military connected communities, research, and policy. That's kind of where my passion lies. And so my mentor has
been really supportive and continues to be supportive in that regard. And so when the battle plan book in that meeting came about, she created an opportunity for me to work with Barbara to really understand how I could wear and contribute, how, when, and why our multiple hats that we wear may be effective tools of engagement in our communities of interest. And so a little bit about my background is on the screen right there. I am a military brat, proud of the service that both the military service members and their families provide. And I do have some experience with the Exceptional Family Members Program, which is aimed at supporting families who have a member with a disability. And so that's kind of what I'm bringing to the table today to that discussion. All right, to continue, today is just this slide is just a brief outline about what we're going to be presenting on today. We wanted to give you kind of a brief background about how the Military Family and Community Policy Office came about and kind of their purpose, and then really spend some time examining DoD's response to 9/11, as well as their response to the aftermath of 9/11 and continued. And then we want to end the presentation today with the discussion about kind of learning the lessons, the things that we really noticed and saw, and the things that we hope that other people can learn in the future, learn from in the future.
So next slide, please. So just very quickly, Congress enacted legislation to ensure that family support, not only programs and policies, would be institutionalized. So they would not go away at the whim of the current leadership or the current administration, that by law we are mandated in the DoD to provide family support. And so I think that's really important when we see how systems are able to change. A lot of it has to do with legislation. Next slide, please. So as we think about our own battle plan, can we go to the next slide? This is a question for the participants. Since 100% of you said that you did have an opportunity to need a battle plan, now think about and reflect on what made your efforts responsive and effective, and if you felt that you missed something or that you weren't as effective as you wanted to be, what was that? So we'd love to hear back from you.
And just as a reminder for some of y'all who may have joined us a bit later, we do have the chat pod available if you wish to share your responses. So thank you to those of you who are currently typing in and sharing. We love to hear from you. So Barbara, Keisha, we have several people responding in the chat that they've experienced in their communities hurricanes such as Irma and Maria, other natural disasters.
Right.
Renee has responded that she had a traumatic event. She lost her son abroad. And the things that she found effective, that she was able to communicate efficiently and effectively with strangers. to help her find him. And she said in which some case which was missing, she wished she could have been better prepared. And then also we've got several others. Thank you so much to everyone who's responding. This is so interesting to hear your feedback and those pieces you wish that you could have had to make it more effective.
You know, Mary Keller, who was the former CEO and president of the Military Child Education Coalition, was one of the authors of one of the chapters. And what she said is that the battle plan really is a framework that's brilliant and it provides a balanced approach. It integrates existing knowledge, diverse perspectives, and experience with thoughtful recommendations. And because what we're hearing from the participants is that there are so many different kinds of tragic events, we really do have to be quite flexible and have a really good preparation um, and to be prepared prior to it happening in order that we have our best response. Okay. So I think the next slide is about where do we go and where do you fit in? I think every organization, I saw a comment about command and control. You know, one thing is you might be a part of the developing of the battle plan, and another thing is you may be a part of executing the battle plan. So it's important to know where you fit in the hierarchy of making sure that you have a successful plan that will be flexible and that will meet the needs of the people who are affected with whatever tragedy you're dealing with. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned previously, my former office was mandated by law in 1986, but over time, we really evolved to become a part of Military Community and Family Policy, which is the larger organization that covers quality of life and direct services to military families. I think what's important to know is that we actually sat down and try to envision what it would mean for a military family to be ready to address whatever challenge came their way. And so these were the things that we really thought were important for them to be knowledgeable, to be equipped, to be aware, and to really know how to access the resources when needed. Next slide, please. Keisha.
So over the past 30 years, the responsibilities and functions have really, of the Military Family and Community Policy Office, have really evolved to meet the ever-changing needs of military families. And right here on your screen is the idea, it's kind of a visual model that supports the idea that organizations inevitably face crises, but few are well prepared to deal with them. And as some of you have expressed, there has been moments where you wish you would have been better prepared or would have had some sort of information or scaffolding. Um, the following are examples of elements that kind of summarize those steps that one would traditionally take and think are effective responses to events or crises. And before 9/11, we thought that those crises and how we might respond along these same lines seemed like a comprehensive process that we were well equipped to handle. Could you, there we go. You could just, I think it's 3 and perfect. Except as a lot of plans go, the DoD's battle plan involved much more than government entities. So in creating the thoughts and about being knowledgeable and ensuring families had those resources and could access them, we really had to be cognizant about everyone who may be impacted by or impact the accommodate our plan. Specifically, we had military families. Who were they? Where were their communities? Who was in the communities? And what did it mean for families to be ready to respond to a battle plan or to implement it or to adjust to it? And so what it might mean for a population to execute these things may change over time. And that's something that we really had to think critically about in our own battle plans. Next slide, please. So we have individuals and we have diverse families that they're in varying structures and functioning. And they are situated within communities that have all different needs at different times for different reasons.
So we did have a formal definition, which is actually in policy, for what connotes a family. But we also needed to consider other active elements or auxiliary support systems for service members and their immediate families. For example, extended family members are those who are geographically isolated from their extended family. How do we reach them? How do we support the Guard and Reserve who were called up um, unprecedented with numbers and time away from their families? So those were things that the battle plan, if we would have had one, could have addressed and made us better prepared to support instead of reacting and trying to find programs and policies that would impact military families. And while defining, when looking at the definition of military family readiness and resilience, there's still a lot for us to learn. And I wanted to share, this is one of the resources on your resource list, but recently the National Academies of Sciences released a consensus study report that's titled Strengthening the Military Readiness System for a Changing American Society. And what's important to think about this new resource that really um, is evidence-based is that they show that one of the DoD's inefficiencies is insufficient data on the family structures that have really changed across the last 30 or 40 years when we've originally started to think about family support. And so when we are not addressing family needs because we don't know about them. So we don't know about this invisible population, which could be the long-term non-marital partner. It could be parents. It could be ex-spouses or ex-partners or any other person who plays a role of support of that service member. And I think we've learned over time that just because you don't have an ID card saying that you're officially a member of the military family, it doesn't mean that you're not there taking care of that service member and making sure that he or she is ready to complete their mission. Keisha?
I apologize, I had myself on mute. So in trying to distill the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, as Barbara just talked about, we quickly realized that there were multiple systems that we needed to consider. We needed to think about well-being and the things that went into that. We needed to think about the systems that individuals were involved in, as well as the systems their families were involved in. And then we also needed to think about kind of patterns of engagement or patterns of influence that they may have throughout their experience with the immediate aftermath of 9/11, as well as their long-term rhythms. Could you click, please? And then we also have to consider that these systems all influence each other and are influenced by each other. And so if you look specifically at these two models on your screen, we have an example from Bronfenbrenner's biosocial ecological model, as well as some multiple rhythms from an article published by Marini and colleagues in 2018 that we encourage you to check out. But the researchers suggest that while typical events, and we're thinking about puberty or school transitions, work transitions, and atypical events like experiencing parental military deployment, all have the potential to influence well-being via disruptions in the family organization or functioning. And so it's really important, and as we thought about the battle plan and what might have been deficient, in our response about who who, when, and why a given event or the aftermath of an event may be meaningful. So understanding the points to prospectively provide tools and support, and in some cases, retrospectively provide interventions was going to be really important. And so we have things to consider like day to day functions, and this could be discussions about child's care responsibilities, or maybe slightly more stable rhythms. And this might be date night once a month or the division of household labor. And finally, how the military deployment itself may influence long term patterns, positive or negative, that an individual, family, and community may have. And so, thus, our considerations were not simply about the here and now, but also about the before and after, and as best we could, the unpredictable, meaning that our battle plan more accurately looked something like this.
So just to remind everyone, while 9/11 occurred 18 years ago, the day after 9/12, 2001, this Pentagon Family Assistance Center was set up and operational in the Sheraton Hotel in Crystal City. And as I said, we were there to support the families of the victims, and we had a variety of services available to them. Simultaneously, great work was being done at the Pentagon to repair the destruction that happened when the plane hit it. And it was the goal to show the world that our response was swift and complete, and we were back in business. And literally a year after 9/11, 2001, you would have never known that we had had that horrific tragedy occur. The building was up and running. Um, However, the people within that building had a new normal that we were dealing with. And to this day, we don't forget what happened on 9/11. And we have to remember that these kinds of things can happen at any time, and we have to be ready and prepared in order to address the myriad of needs that manifests itself after something so horrific. Okay. So, as I said, when we have been looking at family support from 1986, when we were initially charged by Congress to develop family support, we've evolved to what's called the Military Family Readiness System. And we understand that service members and their families have multiple access points depending on their particular issue and their familiarity with the system. Where do they go to find the right resource at the right time for the right person? And I think that's our bottom line. We can overwhelm service members and their families with too much information or too many resources. And so we really have to pinpoint where it's needed, and keep on clicking more. And how we can have this integrated network, which covers so many other aspects of military life. And it's kind of like there's no wrong door. The idea is, if a military family is taking their baby for a baby check over at the clinic or the hospital, that pediatrician or that nurse practitioner knows enough about the military family readiness system that they can refer them to the right resource.
And so, as Barbara just kind of described, there was a lot. Oh, no,
I'm
that's
sorry, I
okay.
was on mute.
That's totally okay.
What I wanted to say was, when we developed the MFRS, we realized that service members and their families have multiple access points, and and also their familiarity with the system makes a big difference on how they engage. And we say that the right information at the right time to the right audience really is key, because you can overwhelm a family with too much information. And what's not listed on the previous slide is what's available off the installation. We know what we're doing on the installation, but it's important that we engage and we recognize that service members and their families go off the installation to look for resources. And we have to be helpful to those agencies that they understand the needs of military families. Thank you. I'm going off mute.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that addition. As Barbara just mentioned, there were a lot of things to consider in our battle plan, like one's level of understanding, their location, their access, and all of those are really important. And something else that's important is this plan that we had, this comprehensive game plan that would address what we surmised to be any crisis was a little insufficient, and we really needed to revise that, because when we were thinking about military families, we weren't really thinking about their impact on mission success and ultimately national security. And so that was a big deficiency in our plan and kind of where we revised going forward. So it wasn't as clean and short-lived. It wasn't this linear process as shown on your screen. It wasn't pretty, and there were things that we couldn't necessarily anticipate, and the plan that we had in place was not situated to accommodate the immediate fallout as well as the enduring patterns of the post 9/11 conflict. Would you advance the slide, please? Thank you. So enter in our new battle plan or our revised plan. And so this plan is kind of a living resource. And on your screen, you're going to see some purple stars, and those indicate objectives that are influenced, um, strongly influenced in the battle plan book itself to support military families. So we wanted this to be a living resource that built in opportunities to divide and conquer, to really support the needs of military families and military communities, meeting them where they are. We quickly realized that burnout was not just a thing that people experience, but also things that organizations experience. And so we really needed to establish rules and supporting roles, as well as standard operating procedures for families, for communities, for policymakers and organizations, all with the mission to support military families, military family readiness, and the missions going forward. And so, in redesigning our battle plan, we remind us all that it's really okay to call an audible or to switch up the roster as we learn and grow new things. No one expected the post 9/11 conflicts to last as long as they have, but we move forward, we take in that information, and we adapt accordingly to best support those that need supporting. Um, Next slide, please. So in reflecting on the chapter and understanding how we make recommendations for the future, there's a couple key things to remember if you take nothing else, although we hope that's not the case, that military family readiness system needs to really be immersed in touch points of family functioning, as well as adapting to identifying gaps at every level of the delivery system of support services, of intervention, and of resources. And they also need to be willing to evaluate themselves and the relevance of those delivery systems, because those two change over time. They change with things like money input, and that's really important and a key factor that we need to consider. Next slide, please. So in the words of C.S. Lewis, you can't go back and change the beginning, but we can start where we are and change the ending. Next slide, please.
So, what are some of the lessons learned that our chapter addresses? And we know that the military audience covers baby boomers through millennials. And how do we recognize what our end users need and how to reach them with messages that resonate with them, so that they really do connect with the resources that the department provides? So I will say this is a constant challenge, is to build the awareness and to make sure these resources have positive outcomes. It was so frustrating for those of us who were delivering services when people did not know that those services existed, and it could have made their lives a lot easier. So again, we look at this large military family readiness system as an ambassador to service members and their families, so that they know what resources are available that they can take advantage of them. So we have to make sure that there's coordination among all of the different agencies in the military services themselves. So the components, the services, and all others who provide support to ensure efficiency and comprehensive services along this continuum of services to improve the quality of life for military families. We recognized very early that our policies and programs and resources needed to change depending on the circumstances. So, depending on the contingency or the type of disaster, and then what do we need to tap down when it's peacetime and people are not, and service members are not deploying like they are during conflicts. So we needed to make sure our policies reflected those different times. So we needed to be able to ramp up those services um, when needed. One more click. And we have to keep in mind special populations. For example, in post 9/11, it was the Guard and Reserve. It's families who have members with special needs. We have to remember that we have to look at those special needs of those special populations when you look at your array of resources and programs that are available and how to reach them. So I think that Military Family Learning Network is a really key component of this ongoing professional development that's needed for service providers. Uh, as I say, we can never rest on our laurels, and reading the battle plan and really getting ready with your colleagues on how to better prepare when a disaster strikes is the ongoing process of professional development. Next click. So, especially for those in the community, how do you get to know your military community? And I would suggest that you start with your family support center on your installation if you have a military installation near you. And if not, reach out to the family director at the Guard and Reserve. Every state has one. So, know what the military family readiness system is and view yourself as a part of that system. Um, and how do you integrate with other members of these organizations so that together, synergistically, we can better serve military families. But it's important to know, so I'm sorry, it's important to know how often you can work with on installation and off installation, especially the cooperative extension, to really build your network of care. Next slide, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you go back to the previous slide? I just wanted to add some comments to support what Barbara was talking about here. Some of the things that we really realized is that we need to be mindful and really think critically about what it means to be a military family member or a military community, specifically what it means to be a veteran or what it means to be a National Guard or Reserve family member, because those internal rationalizations and conceptualizations may impact how families and individuals seek services and communicate about those services or events going on. And then the second thing I'd like to add is that being mindful about conceptualizing or generalizing military family experiences. And so we've talked a lot about different diversity and being mindful of those special populations, but in our policies and in research and in our programming, we have to really consider that the news is going to say one thing, and that may sway the general public in one frame of mind when thinking about military families, and that may impact funding, and that's something that we have to be aware of. But not all families experience the same thing, be it a flood or even birthday parties. And so those are things that individual experiences and community experiences, regional experiences all matter. Thank you.
I think in conclusion, this really does say it well, and how important it is to have a battle plan in place, functional and practiced before these tragic events happen. Next, there's a click, another click. So this is when we would like to open it up for some questions and sharing with people who've shared their experiences with floods and hurricanes and fires and losing a child, how tragic, and how scary, and how do we best prepare to um, react to the needs that are in front of us. Next slide. So thank you for attending, and now we'll open up for questions. And let me throw out this question to the participants.
So Barbara, Keisha, we've had a question come in from the chat pod from Keith, who is asking, can you give an example of how to access a battle plan in real time?
So this is Barbara. It was really important for us to have had prior experience working with tragedies such as the coal. And so we had some experience in how to respond to a major event. And so most installations have a requirement to have a contingency plan. I think the challenge is how relevant are they to a specific occurrence, and they're usually very general. And so that was one of the things that we decided when we were looking at developing the battle plan with the MFRI, is that it really had to be more holistic outside of the installation. So that's why we reached out to the White House and to higher education and all of those other authors to say, how do we, because the 9/11 battle plan lasted for so long, we kept adding pieces to it. And so it has to be an organic kind of a document that doesn't just sit on a shelf and once a year you pull it out and you work with your security people and you do a drill. I mean, it really has to be ongoing, and it has to be a group effort of a lot of different people to make it relevant for that whatever is at hand. And I would think the participants who experience the hurricanes would really have to contribute to this, because while every hurricane might be different, and so how do you react to that?
That's a great example, Barbara. Coming from a family member's perspective, I think that accessing your own battle plan and building that own battle plan really starts with the conversation. And so growing up, it was with my parents who were active duty. It was really like, who do I contact in case of an emergency? Or if I can't get a hold of my mom, for example, then what's the place that I need to go? And where are they expecting me to be? And how do I get there? And who are my alternative contacts if I can't get there, especially as I got older and I couldn't get a license because of my visual impairment. We had to really think creatively about what that might look like in the event that something happened, be it someone's phone died or someone needed a ride. And so really kind of putting yourself to the test in everyday situations, as well as not underestimating how people can pull together in situations. But I think all of that starts with the conversation and just being really realistic about the assets that individuals have and can contribute, and where we can work collaboratively, as Barbara said.
I think that's really right, Keisha. I mean, remember after 9/11, everybody had an emergency kit in their house. And now that things have, maybe, I'm not saying have gotten better, but how many still have an emergency kit ready to go that's up to date and has non-expired, non-perishable food in it and gasoline in their tank in case something happens. It does start with the individual, but we have to have the organizations in place who can be the go-to person, go-to organization when something happens, and that so through your individual plan who you go to and what needs to happen to come together as an organization to hold it all together to be a support system for whatever need is there.
And Barbara, it looks like we have a couple of questions again in that chat pod. One of them is about the biggest challenges we face when writing our portion of the book, and then another one was how we evaluate our battle plans. So I was wondering if you wanted to speak to those first.
Sure. So the chapter that Keisha and I co-authored really was what happened in the Pentagon after 9/11. So we had memories and we had after action reports, which I think are really critical to any major event. That if you take the time and and um, reflect and document what you've experienced and what went wrong, what went right, what are the checklists and the next steps you need to think about when you're developing your battle plan. And there's actually a Pentagon Family Assistance Report that is on Military One Source, which lays out what those lessons were in the Pentagon. And that's the starting point for developing your current battle plan. It's not the end all be all. It's one document, it's one reference, one resource that helps you develop your larger plan. But I think what's so important about the battle plan is it brings the lessons learned from all those different communities. And so, as the person who is in charge of family support for the DoD, those chapters were crucial for me to think about what would be our next steps if we ever had another contingency. And it really is if, it's not if, it's when. There will be another contingency, and we better be prepared for it and not scramble to provide the, the resources that we know that were needed to support families so that they could um, be as resilient as they possibly could under really dire circumstances.
And I will add to that a little bit as someone that's coming into the realm of research and policy. And when this chapter was being written, I think the thing that I really had to challenge myself on is what hat was appropriate when. And so, as a family member, I had one perspective in response to 9/11 and what that looked like for me, seeing my parents deploy and all of those things. And then as a researcher, I had another hat that was like, oh, well, we need to get this metric and we need to hear from families in this way. And then as a policymaker, it's like, okay, so what's the bottom line? And ultimately, how do we get people to understand that? And then how do we pay for it? And so really getting to learn from those that came before me and having wonderful mentors that tolerate all of my questions. I think that's really important, is to just ask questions and learn and evaluate where you're coming from, because that kind of positions your perspective and how you move forward. And so that's kind of what I took away from that part.
And as far as evaluation, you know, well, our efforts were not evaluated as a part of a research project, if you will. The evaluation came in the reflection of how we were not meeting the needs of certain family members, and that was very obvious to those of us in the Pentagon Family Assistance Center, and over time throughout the conflict, where we would see family members basically having a really difficult time dealing with these long-term deployments in very dangerous situations. And so we would react to that. So our battle plan was not very good in the sense of how could we not envision that the stay-at-home parent who was a stay-at-home parent now for by themselves, taking care of their family for 12 months that they needed support. So that's where we provided respite care for families so that they could have a break. Those were the kinds of things we were reacting to what was manifesting versus being prepared. And that's where our chapter is, I hope, will give family support professionals in the future things to think about. Because unless you're experiencing it, um, you may not have the right response. Families really do need to be included in the battle plan. And I think when you look at the book, many of the authors are family members, are service members, are former service members. So they have real life experience in this and commitment to making it right the next time.
And if I may also tag in on this idea of the family readiness system and the integration of different levels of battle plans, whether it's kind of the micro level of the family to the broader aspects of how organizations can come together. I would invite anybody who's in attendance, if you haven't taken a look at our virtual conference that the Military Families Learning Network hosted just a few weeks ago, it does take a really in-depth look on the military family readiness system and dives in pretty deep to different aspects of how to work across organizational lines, whether it's on the family level or on the organizational level, on installation or off, and can be a great supplement to the resources that Barbara and Keisha referenced and also dug into today as well. So at the moment, Barbara, Keisha, I'm not seeing any additional questions coming through the chat. So I'm going to go ahead, if it's all right with y'all, and move through our couple of wrap-up portions. Keely, thank you so much. Keely has just posted in the chat for anyone who's interested a link to our archived virtual conference sessions. And so we do invite y'all to head over there to check out those sessions and resources that are available around that topic, as well as don't forget to check out our event page for today's webinar that does have a resource list for all of the different references that Keisha and Barbara have been mentioning throughout our session today, as well as many more that you may find of interest. So however, as we're going through our wrap up, don't hesitate to pop any additional questions that you may think of or comments or references that you found of use in your work into the chat before we wrap officially for today.
And Coral, I'd also like to add, feel free to contact us. I think Barbara and I are both willing and able to answer any questions that you have about the materials that we've presented today. And our contact information is on that first slide.
Keisha, thank you so much. So we do invite y'all to connect with the Military Families Learning Network. We're in many different spaces online. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, and on Twitter. We also host an archive of every professional development session that we've ever hosted is on YouTube. And also we have a whole host of podcasts and audiocasts that are also available for your reference, along with articles and blog posts on our website. So in case you are interested in obtaining a certificate of completion today, we invite you to head back over to our event page, militaryfamilieslearningnetwork.org/event/52255. And if you scroll down a little bit towards the bottom, you'll find this purple button, and just click on it to access the evaluation link and subsequently enter your information for a certificate of completion. If you have any questions about how to, if you're having difficulty with this process, don't hesitate to shoot us an email at milfamln@gmail.com, and we're happy to assist you in any way possible. So Keisha, Barbara, thank you both so much again for your time today and for this incredible work that you have shared with us. It sounds like such an incredible resource, as well as compiling the many additional resources that we have available available on our reference list on the event page. So we just greatly appreciate your time and your expertise in sharing it with us all today.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Coral. And thank you everyone for attending and contributing to our discussion for today.
Yes, it's been very rewarding for Keisha and I to share the lessons learned, because it doesn't do any good if it's sitting on a shelf.
Absolutely. And I will note that we do archive, as I mentioned, all of our sessions. So today's archived recording will be available in the next couple of working days on the event page. If you wish to share this recording with anybody who may find it of use, we do invite you and welcome you to share this as a resource. So we'll stay on for another couple of minutes in case you need to grab any final references from the chat pod. Do know again that they are available on the event page. So if you're headed out, thanks again for joining us. And Barbara and Keisha, thank you once more.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions coming through the chat pod. So thank you all so much again for tuning in today. Keisha, Barbara, we wish you a wonderful day as well. And thank you again for sharing your expertise with us today. So we'll go ahead and be closing out the room here shortly. Take care, and we'll see you at another MFLN event in the very near future. Take care.
Thank you, Coral. Have a wonderful day.